So I'd like to welcome our online audience today to join us. So glad you're tuning in. It's great to see people out here, even see faces of people that I've not seen, at least on a Sunday morning, in a long time. And so welcome to all of you to Frontline Bible Church. And to those who have the privilege of being a father, I want to say Happy Father's Day to every single one of you here. And so I thought it was only fitting today that we would talk about Father's Day. It didn't really fit with the next section of 1 Peter. So as you can see in all of my creative abilities, I took a green box and I put it over the words 1 Peter. But we're going to be doing Father's Day, and that's what we're going to talk about. Because this is a super important topic, and it fits very well, I believe, with the theme of our series, which is embracing opposition. Because I will tell you that being a father, being a dad, being a man requires you to undergo opposition. And as we've talked about in the series, are we going to embrace it? Or do we run away from it? Do we look and say, you know what, being a man is way too hard, I'm just going to check out. You know what, yes, I realize I'm a man, I get it, that's all right, but I'm just going to go away because being a man in our culture is challenging. Are we going to embrace it? Are we going to fight against it? What are we going to do? And I think our culture, as much as our culture is saying, no, we don't want manly men, our culture is needing and craving for manly men. Interestingly enough, I'll read, there was an article that came out just not too long ago because China made an announcement. China is looking for manly men. Were you aware of that? China's looking for manly men. This actually was a news report that came out on NBC News. So it's not just some left, right-wing conspiracy, whatever thing. You know, it was an article. And the reason why was because China is realizing that their men aren't very, as they say, manly anymore. And so they put together an agency. It's called the Agency to Prevent the Feminization of Male Adolescents. It's a real thing. To prevent the feminization of male adolescents. And so here's their plan. I love it. We're going to hire and train more gym teachers. We're going to test students more comprehensively in physical education. We're going to make health education compulsory, and you'll love this last one. We are going to support research into issues like, quote, the influence of the phenomenon of internet celebrities on adolescent values. So, get them into gym class, make sure they're doing gym class. We need to get rid of these internet celebrities. That's what it is. So there was a satirical piece that was put out by an agency or a group known by the Babylon Bee. I don't know if you know about this group, but it's actually pretty funny. And so what they came up with was it was an op-ed piece that was written that said that the way to answer the feminization of men is to make playground equipment more dangerous. So, in order to illustrate this, I thought I would pull up some playground equipment that might illustrate what's happened, you know? So, I'm going to pull this up here. How many of you have seen something like this? Now, that is a manly playground right there, isn't it? I mean, it just screams manliness. Cushy slides, you know, soft cushions all over the place, you know, it's probably wood chips. You know, no ladder is higher than about 3 feet tall. I want you to notice, okay, this was playground equipment from about 100 years ago, all right? So next thing we're going to see this, all right? How many of you remember this piece of manly equipment right there? Yeah, exactly. I mean, you feel this, don't you? In fact, it was your legs and your bum that felt this. Do you remember how, I think they put heaters on these things, you know? You would go to sit down, it's like 150 degrees, and as a kid you're thinking, this is the best time ever. Oh no. Okay, come back. So here, this is like the all-metal slide, you can see this. Notice how high up kids would go. I mean, the chance of falling off of this is extremely likely. I'm just surprised there was not concrete down here. Look at this one. Notice the line of kids on the ladder, and this dude's like, I'm not sure I want to go down that thing right there. But he's sitting there. Now, in the article that I read, now, the way in which you get down from this thing is you actually put your bum between those two, and then you slide down with your legs. Okay, so you hang your legs over, and then you slide down. Here's the thing. This, according to the article, this was made of wood. Playground equipment is required to make more manly men. That's what I'm gathering here. And then this last one, I thought this was interesting. This is a real photo from a park in Dallas, Texas. These kids, this is a kid who's hanging out way up top. I mean, I guess this is the original idea of a jungle gym. Now, according to the article, this kid is not falling, okay? He's actually just swinging right here, but you can't see the swings. But you can just picture that guy going, oh man, this stinks to be him. But you can see here's this big ladder that they go up, then they slide down this guy is transitioning. You wonder how many kids fell off this. And these people below seem oblivious to the fact that they could be killed by somebody falling off. So I thought it was interesting. Because in the article with the Babylon Bee, he says this is the lie. Fiberglass fun houses over rubber and cautions and covered in caution signs to make sure little Timmy doesn't get a scrape tells children that the world is supposed to be safe and easy. Now, I'm not making a judgment call about this. I'm not saying we go back to this because this sounds bad. This is just a bad idea. It should have been phased out. But it does illustrate a principle here and a point. Are we living in a world that is telling men especially, but men and women, that the world is safe, it's easy, it should be comfortable, and if there's pain and risk involved, no, you need to go away. In fact, I think that's a lot of what's happening. You see, here's what I see from the Bible. Godly men, they lead, they protect, they provide, especially in the home and in the church. Especially in those places. Now, there are some out there who wants to see men lead, protect, provide in all areas of life. And in other words, women should not work outside the home. Women shouldn't be leaders. Women shouldn't. That's not what I'm saying. Okay? But I do believe as men stand up and actually protect, actually show leadership, actually show what it looks like to take the responsibility for provision, I think that not only will it affect the home, but I believe also it will affect the society at large as well. And so if this is what godly men do, I will ask you, how many godly men do you know? You know, some people, what you see is not, unfortunately, this in the home. For some of you, as J.D. mentioned earlier, for some of you, you didn't see a godly example of a dad. In fact, a lot of times what you saw was an example of passivity. This is the definition of passivity. It is the acceptance of what happens without active response or resistance. We see godly men lead, they protect, they provide. But how many of you men out here, or how many of you women have seen when men tried to lead, when men tried to protect, when men tried to provide, that they were met with active resistance? And in turn, a lot of men, you know what they did? They decided it's easier just to go passive. You know what? You want to fight against it? You don't want me to be a leader? You don't want me to provide? You don't want me to protect? Well, guess what? I'm going golfing. It's not a slam on golfing. I'm going fishing. I'm going to work 100 hours a week because there I get respect, there I get appreciation, there I get accolades, whatever else. And so as a result, I think today what I want to do is I want to call men back. I want to call all of you to say, here's a biblical picture of manhood. Here's a biblical picture of what it means to be a man. But actually, rejecting passivity affects you ladies as well. You see, I don't think it's just men who accept what happens without active response or resistance. In fact, there's an all-out war on women today. There's an all-out war on you to say, stop being women and be men. There's a war on men to say, stop being men and be women. Let's just completely remove any sort of differences between men and women. But I will tell you, as women, it's just as hard for you. Just as hard for you to not just accept the culture's attitudes towards this and just completely file in. You see, I think it's going to take not passivity, but activity. As we move forward and as we be godly men and godly women, we live in a world that doesn't want this. And we as the church, I think, need to embody, because this really was God's design. And so with that, let's get into our thing, which I'm going to give you my big, long sermon theme. I hope you can remember all these words. Reject passivity. It's time that we just say, you know what? No, I don't have to accept this. I reject it. I reject it as somebody who says, you know what? I don't have to go passive. Yes, I understand. Maybe my family is seemingly pushing me this way, but you know what? I'm not going to do it. I will be a man, or I will be a godly woman. And so as we go through, what's it going to require? First thing it's going to require, strength. Strength. I want you to turn in your Bibles to Genesis chapter 3, please. Genesis chapter 3. I know we've preached this one, but man, it's really important. Genesis 3. Verse 16. To the woman, Genesis 3:6, Verse 6. When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. You know, this passage, when I was growing up, I guess I always just assumed that Adam was probably hanging out somewhere else in the garden. You know, he was over tending something. He's, hoeing things, or, picking berries, or doing something in other parts of the garden. Because when you see the pictures of the serpent, if you see artistic images of this, they show that here you have the serpent communicating with Eve, and that's all you got. You got the serpent, you got Eve, and the serpent is there going, what about this piece of fruit? What about this piece of fruit? Notice I didn't say apple. Apple gets the bad rap. But notice the piece of fruit. It's the tree of knowledge of good and evil. God's holding out on you. If you do this, you can be like God. You don't have to let Him tell you what's right and what's wrong. You can be God on your own. Therefore, why don't you eat of the fruit? And so Eve, in the picture, all by herself, she's there having a fight with the devil. And as a result, it says she took of the fruit and she ate it. And almost as if she goes, Adam, where are you? Adam, come here, I got some fruit for you to eat. Oh, honey, what's going on? Oh, yeah, that fruit does look good. But that's really not what the text says. The text says that while the serpent was there trying to deceive Eve, it says that Adam was right there with her. And so what we see is a picture of passivity on the part of Adam. Right here in the very beginning. Right here in the beginning, we see the serpent saying, Eve, what do you think about this? Why didn't the serpent go to Adam? Why didn't he? I don't know. But it's interesting that the Bible tells us that it says Eve was deceived. Adam was the one who sinned. In fact, when you turn to Romans chapter 5, the blame for sin entering the world is placed on one person, and that is Adam. You see, Adam was the one who was given the command to not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. But unfortunately, he went passive when it came to his chance to say, you know what? No, I'm going to step in. I'm going to step into the situation because the situation here says the serpent is trying to deceive my wife. This is not a matter of saying, get out of the way, honey. This is my problem. But this is a matter of saying, I'm going to step in and say, wait a second here. God told us something. And he told us that we were not supposed to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And therefore, honey, what do you think? I don't think we should do what this crazy serpent is doing, telling us to do. I think the answer is no. I don't need your fruit. I trust God. But instead, what does he do? He stands back. Eve is here all by herself. You know, it looks good. It says it's desirable for gaining wisdom. You know what? We would be smarter if we do this. I don't know. You think? I think I'm going to eat it. Adam, what do you think? Right here. Adam goes, well, you know what? Time to start listening to my wife. It says he listened to his wife and he ate it. Now, I don't believe the Scripture is telling us to not listen to our wives. Trust me, because they give us unbelievable wisdom. But just because your wife says this, if it's not biblical, guess what you should say? No. That's what it is. Passive man says, if my wife says I should do it, I guess I should do it. I don't want to make ripples in the home. It was interesting, part of this sermon came about because of a situation that happened for me a few years ago. It was a situation that was going on in my home. And by the way, I have my wife's permission to share this. My wife and I were having some difficulties. We were having some marital tensions, I guess you would say. And it was very frustrating. And being a pastor, being a typical man, I knew I was right. I knew she was wrong, and it was only a matter of time and prayer that would get her to come and understand. Thank you, honey. I asked and I had permission to share all this, all right? Oh, not that part. Okay. What was happening, here's what happened. I was very frustrated. Things were going a certain way, and so I went over across the street, over to Starbucks. And I was fit to be tied. We were going to a family Bible conference thing up in Minnesota, and I was going to be spending a week with my wife and my family. And it was the last place that I wanted to be at that moment. Have you ever had one of those times in your marriage? Maybe in a relationship where it's just difficulties, and you really don't want to hang out with them very much. And so what happened was, I went over to Starbucks, and I was there for about 4 hours, which I'm sure they were ready for me to leave. By the way, this was prior to COVID when you could hang out at Starbucks for a while. I'm there and I write this letter to my wife. It was 4 pages, single-spaced, typed. And I took that letter and I went out and I gave it to a few people, both men and women. And I said, I need you to look at this because I need to get some things off my chest. And one of the things that I realized after writing that letter, here's what I realized. I was a big part of our problem. And even though that there were things that my wife had, issues that she had, and I wasn't claiming everything, but it took writing that letter to realize, you know who I was? I was a passive husband. Because what would happen is my wife would come with her claws out. She came by that genetically, I think. I love my family. I love them. Here's the deal. We all come by it this way. But my wife would come back with her claws out as I would step in. I would step into an issue. Hey, honey, we need to talk about something. Have you ever had one of those moments? Hey, honey, let's talk about something. But usually it was I wait till the very last possible minute when I couldn't stand it anymore, and then I would come in and say, we need to talk. And so guess what would happen? My wife would say, all right, let's meet. Let's talk. I would start talking. I would realize the claws were out, and then I would say, you know what? It's not worth it. And I would step back. But I would resent it. And resentment would build up until I couldn't take it anymore. And then I would step back in, and she would step back in. And I would back away. Over time, this begins to happen, and guess what happens between husbands and wives? Distance. You no longer talk. You no longer get things out in the open. You no longer deal with things when they come up. Instead, you just run. And as men, it's easier just to go to work. It's easier just to stop being men who lead, provide, protect. And we just step back. And this doesn't just happen with married men. This happens with dating men. This happens with fathers. This happens in the workplace. This happens in an awful lot of places when we realize as men that like God's poking us, we got to deal with something. And so, but rather than answering with strength, we simply go passive. Because I think we fear something, which I want to get to my next point here. We fear something because we fear that if we actually become men and we step up in strength, that our strength is going to overpower. Because that's what a lot of men do. They step into here, and when the claws come out, okay? When the claws come out here, what do the men do? They step out, and rather than just coming in and saying, I'm going to be a man, they step in, fists out. Now, maybe they're not going to strike with the fist, because most men know better. But unfortunately, what they do is they strike with words. They strike with the silent treatment. They strike with whatever else, because they don't understand that it's not just a requirement for strength. It's actually a requirement for strength under control. You see, meekness is... The definition of meekness is this. I love it. It's really short and sweet. Strength under control. You see, what we think meekness is actually weakness. Weakness is the inability to do something about something. That's weakness. Meekness says, oh, I can. I choose not to. It's like Chuck Norris against any one of you. Okay? And me too. Meekness is when you realize I have the power to do something, but I'm going to choose not to. In fact, it's interesting. If you're still there in Genesis chapter 3, verse 16. To the woman he said, I will greatly increase your pains in childbearing. With pain you will give birth to children. Your desire will be for your husband. And then it says, and he will rule over you. That phrase there, your desire will be for your husband. As many men as would love for that to be sexually, that's not the idea of the passage. Your desire will be for your husband's role as leader, provider, protector. That will be your husband. But it says, and he will rule over you. And there's the picture. You have the man who says, I'm going to step up and I'm going to take the leadership. I'm going to provide, I'm going to protect in my home. But the woman will say, I'm not sure I like the way you're doing this. Get out of the way. Let me take the leadership. Let me do this. And so it becomes a power struggle. I'm in the lead. No, I'm in the lead. No, I'm in the lead. No, I'm in the lead. And so it becomes the power struggle. Some men will go passive. All right, you want to lead? I'm going golfing. How many men have done that? Especially even when it comes to spiritual leadership in the home. How many women are having to lead their family spiritually simply because the men refuse to do so? And even as men are called to lead in the home, whether relationally or physically or emotionally or spiritually, men abdicate that because, guess what? It's just easier. It's just easier. I don't need to be able to stay here. And especially if they get grief. If the woman comes along and says, I don't like the way you're doing this, I don't like the way you're doing this, rather than the man going, help me do it the right way. help me, let's lead this thing together. Let's work together. That's what a husband and wife team should look like. Rather than being that, the man says, oh, you want to do it? Have you ever done that before, men, by the way? Oh, you don't like the way I wash dishes? Guess what? You can wash the dishes. Oh, the toilet's not clean enough for you? Guess what? You can do the toilet. Have you ever known anybody to do that? I never have. Never. The world sees the problem, right? The world sees the problem. But their answer is, rather than saying, you know what, men, we need strength, but strength under control. Not a man who pulls out the fist, but a man who says, you know what, you can come at me. You can come at me, but guess what? I'm not going anywhere. It doesn't mean that I'm going to rule over you. I don't know of any man who I know who's a godly man who gauges their strength off of how much better they are than women. But I know an awful lot of women who gauge their strength on how much better they are than men. It's a one-way fight. But as we as men stand forward and we come forward and we say, you know what? God has called me to lead. He's called me to protect. He's called me to provide. I'm going to be a godly man, and I'm not going anywhere. So you can come at me with your claws. You can come at me. But I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to listen. I'm going to protect you. I'm going to provide for you. I'm going to stay engaged with you. But that's what I'm going to do, because godly men have strength, but they have strength under control. And that's what happened in my marriage. It took a little while. But I can truthfully say that my wife and I are so much better than what we were. Because now we talk about things before they become issues. Rather than me hanging out in the back going, I don't want to bring that one up because I'm afraid of the claws. I step in, but it's strength under control. Hon, we need to talk about this. And we talk, and we talk. There's not anything we can't talk about now. Because it's strength under control. There's a lot of other passages we could go to. Some of these other ones, I'll just read them for you. 1 Peter 3:7, husbands, in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives. Be considerate as you live with your wives, and treat them with respect. We'll get to this when we keep going through 1 Peter. Treat them with respect as the weaker partner. Now, why would he say that? Are women weak? No way. Are characteristically weaker than men? Yes. But the difference between a man and a woman, interestingly enough, the idea of weaker is the idea of something that's even more fragile but more precious. It's like the idea of fine china. You don't use fine china every day, do you? Because it's special. It's something to be protected and something to be valued, and so we hold it up and we protect it versus the plastic plates that you eat from every single day. Who cares if one breaks, right? But for women, what it is, you treat them considerately with respect as the weaker partner. Because why? Because men are called to lead and provide and protect women. And then he goes on. Treat them with respect as the weaker partner and as heirs with you of the gracious gift of life, this last part, so that nothing will hinder your prayers. You know what it tells me? For men who refuse to be men, for men who go passive, what ends up happening is, Peter tells us, it affects your prayer life. It's going to affect your ability to do your relationship with God. Men who refuse to act under strength, act with strength that's under control, will have their prayer lives be affected. That's what it says. And God tells us through the Word also to not exasperate your children. Now, I promise you, okay, if you're a father, and here's the deal, you know what? He tells this specifically to men. He doesn't say women don't exasperate your children, so women, you're off the hook. You can exasperate them as much as you want. I don't think that's what he's saying. What he's saying here is that men, because we are strong, because it would be very easy for us to evidence strength. Oh, you want to stand up against dad? Is that what you want to do? Rather than doing that, we say, you know what? I'm going to be the man. I'm not going anywhere. Oh, you can come at me. You can do what you're going to do. You can say what you're going to say, but I'm not moving. I will be the man of this house. And I will love and serve and protect my family as the man of this house. The extremes, weakness. The other extreme is domination as men. What would happen if we simply evidence strength under control? Which leads to the last one. It's strength under the control of Christ. It's not just strength under control, it's strength under the control of Christ. One of the most famous verses, Joshua 24:15. Probably a lot of you have the sign up in your house, if you're good Christians, that is. I'm just kidding. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord, right? That's the sign there. You can do what you're going to want to do. You can do what you want to do out there, but you know what? In this house, doggone it, we're going to serve the Lord. Let me tell you, in a culture that is telling us Christianity is bad, Christianity is toxic, Christianity is chauvinistic, it's bigoted, it's whatever else. Trust me, when you say those words, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord, it's a war cry. It's what it is. And as we as men come forward and we say, yes, I will evidence strength, but yes, I will evidence strength under control, and yes, I will evidence strength under the control of Christ because He's the one that I answer to. And so, remember when Jesus went to the cross? Remember when He went to the cross? There's a song many years ago. He could have called 10,000 angels. Take Him right off the cross. But it says, no, He died alone for you and me. Why? Because that was the will of God. And so for us, as men, as we are called to lead and provide and protect in our homes and in the church, it's time that we understand what it means to be biblical men, godly men, who are willing to count the cost and say, yes, I realize, yes, I love my wife, but guess who I answer to first? It's God. Oh, yes, I love my kids. I'd do anything for my kids and my wife, but I answer to God first. That is who I need to submit to. But here's the thing. When we submit to God first, you know what He does? He gives us what's known as the fruit of the Spirit. And you know what ends up happening in our lives? We end up showing love, and we show joy, and we show peace, and we show patience, kindness, gentleness, self-control, and a few other ones that I'm forgetting at the moment. Faithfulness was one. There was another one. That's what we end up showing. Why? Because we are strong, under the control of Christ. And the world around us is desperately needing men who are self-controlled, right? Unfortunately, a lot of men say, you know what, I don't feel self-controlled. I'm going to act the way I want to. I'm going to do whatever I want to. But oh my goodness, the world needs men who are willing to be strong, men who are under the control of Christ. There's one verse that I need you to turn to, and I know we're out of time, but I want you to see this. 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verse 13. 1 Corinthians chapter 16 and verse 13. First Corinthians 16, verse 13. Paul's writing, and it's interesting. He specifically calls out men. This is not mankind. This is not whoever it is. This is men. And he says here in this passage, he says, be on your guard. Stand firm in the faith. Be men of courage. Be strong, but do everything in love. You see, this is not something where being a man and being a strong man is anti-love. That's the wrong picture. But it does require us that we be men and we stand firm and we enter the fight and we go in and we don't run when the claws come out, whenever that is, whether it's our wives or our kids or our neighbors or our whoever it is. It requires that we're going to step up and be men. That's what it requires. It will take courage, but it will take faith as well. And so as we wrap it up here today, here's my challenge. Reject passivity. If you look as a man and you feel like, you know what, you've gone passive, because there's all areas. Where are you being passive today? Are you being passive with your spiritual life? Are you being passive with your finances? Are you being passive with your kids? Are you being passive with your spouse? Are you being passive with your moral life? Are you being passive in these areas? That's the question. Here's the thing. We're all easily guilty of this. I don't want this to be a judgmental sermon by any means. I want it to be a call for more. That's what I want. A call for more, for men who are willing to say, you know what, I'm not going to run. I'm not going to just leave my place of what God has called me to do. I want to be a man, a godly man. And so, as we close, my challenge to you is to step in. Step in. Come here. Stand firm. That doesn't mean we're going after him. It means I'm standing firm. I will stand firm as a man of faith and a man of courage. That's what I will do. That's my challenge. Let's close with prayer. I'm so glad I waited to the end to do that. All right, let's pray. God, thank you for today. I thank you for your word. I thank you for the ways in which I think you've even shown me how passive I can be. And man, I want to reject it in my life in all areas. I thank you for the wife you've given me, the kids you've given me that have encouraged me and helped me to learn what it means to stand firm, to not give in to the pressures of the culture, to the pressures of just being easy and comfortable. May we as men actually show what it's like to be men, godly men, especially in the church. Lord, I pray that the women who are around us will realize what it's like to be led by godly men, not boys who can shave, but truly men. Lord, may our church be affected by men who reject passivity, even women who reject passivity, who are willing to live out their calling as men and women, because together we beautifully picture the image of God to a world that desperately needs to see that. So I thank you for today. I thank you for your word. Work in us. In Jesus' name we pray. And all those in agreement said, amen.